Boom, familia. We are here to discuss Uncanny X-Men 341. But Tim, who do we have on the podcast to help us discuss Uncanny X-Men 341?
Well, Dave Spring, thank you for having me along for the ride. We have writer of the X-Men from the 1990s, I think specifically about 1992 through 1997, but he would be the authority on the subject, none other than Scott Lobdell.
What? That's crazy. I didn't know he was still alive.
Yeah, how about that?
Dude, and
I hope he says something funny or charming or insightful or something. He's not really known for being charming or funny or insightful, so I look forward to... Oh, wait a minute. That's me. How awkward.
At least he's self-deprecating.
Self-defecating? Is that what you said?
Wait a minute.
Self-defecating.
That might be something else.
Scott,
Yeah.
are you aware of how
Yes.
Uncanny X-Men 341 has shaped so many of our lives, especially from a reader perspective?
I've heard from reliable sources that it actually changed the entire direction of the comic book industry. And everybody, not even people who read it, but people who haven't read it and had only heard about it. And in fact, Stan, when we used to hang out, would tell me that when he was serving in the Army, which was between his Timely years and his Marvel years, he actually served in the armed services. And he said that he had stumbled across a time capsule, and none other than this issue was the one that he found. And he was so impressed. He was like, "Oh my God, Lobby, I can't believe it. Like, this is the future of comic books." And so he started, I said, "Stan, start out with just a team of 4, because it's easy to manage that way." And he's like, "I think you're right." So that's kind of how Marvel Comics was born, and it all started here, some 30 years after. 30 years after. I don't know why.
Because 341 somehow ended up in the time stream, landed on Stan Lee's, and that's how we have the comic book industry. That's how we have Marvel Comics.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, Tim's like, yeah, that happens all the time.
I mean, just the legend of Uncanny X-Men.
Tim's like, I can't even muster enthusiasm for this. What's that? What he said?
Still processing it, really.
Yeah, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
But Scott, so how did it come? How did you pitch this story? What did you always wanted to do, a holiday story? But obviously this was a precursor to a much larger story that you had planned. What was sort of the editorial process for this?
I, as anybody who read a bunch of the issues that I wrote, I always really, really loved the quiet issues. I used to call them the rooftop issues because Gambit and Rogue, after Executioner's Song, it was 3 things were going on in that issue. Hank and Bobby were rebuilding Hank's hideaway, which had been destroyed, and Rogue and Gambit were sitting on a roof talking about how pointless their relationship was because intimacy was off the table because of because of Rogue's powers, and how was she going to have a full loving relationship with Gambit, who was kind of a ladies' man at the time anyway. So and then Jubilee and Professor X went rollerblading, and that was I loved that issue, and I loved any time I was able to step away from the bigger stories and just focus on the characters. There's a Thanksgiving issue I did one year with John Romita Jr. And this issue was like, what? I looked at the calendar. I'm like, oh, this is going to be the December issue. Let's just have a blast with it. And so that's how it started. But even more importantly was I was thinking of it in terms of I was getting email at the time, and I loved having Cannonball on the team. I thought he was a great, breath of fresh air in the group because, like, you can say what you want, but the X-Men are the major league, and anything other than that, Generation X, X Factors, everything else is not the X-Men. And so for Sam to become a member of the X-Men, I was thrilled by the idea of having him graduate to the X-Men. But I kept getting letters from people, and they're like, "Oh, you ruined him because you made him like he's like the baby of the team, and he's really good." And I'm like, "Of course he's good. Like, how do you think he got to the X-Men? It wasn't a favor. He didn't have compromising photos of Xavier or anything. I mean, he was there because he was ready. He was absolutely ready." And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to write an issue where Sam shows up and kicks Sam and Gladiator mix it up, and everybody knows that Gladiator is like, it was Marvel Superman. And so he, he's the strongest character in canon at the time, and I was like, you know what, Sam's going to kick his ass, and then everybody will have to shut up, and they can't say, "Oh, you made Sam, the little baby." Instead, Sam is up there. People still remember this issue as the issue that Sam kicked butt. And what was always fun was, to me, Gladiator didn't have. I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's. But that was the purpose. It was like, yeah, let's just do a slow down Christmas issue, have a blast. There was a time during the X-Men when I had, it was the Thanksgiving issue. It's the bachelor party issue. It was the issue, The Lions Come at Night, where it was the Xavier and Magneto trapped in Xavier's mind together. And he was going over that horrible thing that happened with him and Amelia Vogt. And at the time, the head of marketing, his name was Ski, came down and he said, I wasn't around, but he went in the office and he goes, Lobdell hasn't thrown a punch in 4 issues. He hasn't, no one's punched anybody. No one's used their powers. Like, I don't know. And Bob was like, "Oh, well, we can, it's marketing." So he's like, we can change it up. And he goes, "No, I kind of like it. It's kind of weird. It's like, and it was funny because in my head I was thinking, okay, Fabian, go have your fun. And, Fabian was really good with super elaborate plotting. And I always say that I didn't know what was going to happen until the end of the issue. And I'd be like, wow, that's fascinating. There's Sabretooth. What happens next? And then next month, when it was time to write the next issue, I'd be like, okay, so now we're trapped in the, room filling with water, and Sabretooth is there. And this didn't really happen. I'm just making an example. But then I was like, okay, well, how do I write myself out of this one? Because I always said I could surprise the audience. I'm sorry. I always said if I could surprise myself, I could surprise the audience. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to keep the X-Men fresh. So Fabian, God bless him, could tell you what happened, if he started X-Force number 1, he could tell you what happens in X-Force number 50. Because he knew, because he was a plotter and he was very good at it. Whereas I was, I don't know, let's see what happens. Let's see what characters spark, what characters does. I mean, who knew Mara was going to, turn out to be such an interesting character? She was supposed to be a one-off and die and pretty quickly, but, now people love her. So
I love that you mentioned that run of issues from the engagement, which was the Thanksgiving issue, right through to the wedding, which I know you didn't write the actual wedding issue between Scott and Jean, but I was just thinking that's probably my favorite run of issues that you did on Uncanny. And it was in rereading this issue 341, it struck me how it was kind of structurally similar to the bachelor party issue, where it's like half a rooftop issue, right, where it's kind of chatty, character focused, but you do have a fight scene thrown in there, right, so to appease the masses maybe. So you've got, you know, Cannonball beating Gladiator's ass in this issue, and you had in the bachelor party Cyclops and Cable beating up on Executioner. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, which is what I love so much about so many of the comics you wrote, particularly your run on Uncanny. So yeah, I was just astonished that you kind of went back there, as I was thinking the same thing.
There's that issue with Bobby and his father, where he's holding his father on the cover, and there's so many issues along the way that I would just stop and spend as much time focused on a particular character. But I could also do action, like Operation Zero Tolerance did not stop. It was just boom, 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 but it was so much fun, And so I remember when I got to DC, eventually, maybe in a month or two in, somebody on the internet had a thought and they had to share it with the world. And this was back then when the internet was, new, and people were like, hey, I'm going to say something. And then other people go, oh, look what he said. It's true. Somebody said, oh, Scott Lobdell is like the Michael Bay of comic books. He only cares about explosions. And I'm like, okay, well, that's someone who's never read a Scott Lobdell issue in his life. So, so it's hard to take criticism from people. And then, I don't know, months later, somebody would be like, yeah, I read that. He's like Michael Bay. I'm like, I wish I was like Michael Bay. I wish I was rich. I wish I was as rich as Michael Bay. Let me tell you that. So it's like, I think I'm known for the issues that I most like, which are these issues. And other, but other people, what's the word? Mileage may vary, so.
I think anyone who would say something like that is just such a mean-spirited, ill-informed person, because one, I mean, when you pick up a Scott Lobdell issue, one, things actually happen in the issue. B, and we talk about this all the time on the podcast, that we need more writers, creators like you out there in the comic book industry. What you did with Age of Apocalypse, for example, people don't understand that you challenged sales and you were doing something different, and it redefined the way that X-Men do crossovers and the entire industry. And it was at a time when X-Men was #1, and if this did not pan out, the entire industry would implode. And you did that. You had the balls to do something like that. That's not like, I don't like the internet when the internet just doesn't give an informed perspective on something. You know what I mean? So,
well, another perfect example is, Bob Harris, God bless him, worked very, very, very hard every single day of his life when he was at Marvel. And then, Marvel, independent of him, he got word from up on high that Marvel was going to buy their own distributor and distribute their own comic books. Isn't that great? Isn't that amazing? And it turned out that the distributor, it'd be like, I don't know, saying, hey, we have this watermelon, and instead of putting it in a shopping bag and carrying it home, we're going to stick it into a balloon, a water balloon, and you can throw it over your shoulder, and it'll be so much fun, and instead, the whole industry just, it was a body blow. Because, this company that handled 3 states essentially had to turn around and handle 51 states and international and blah, 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 blah. And it was a total disaster. And he had nothing to do with it. And I was there, and all we could do was focus on the comic books. That was our job. That was my job. That was his job. And every few years I hear people go, well, Bob Harris bankrupt Marvel, so I mean, that it's so there's not even a basis for that assumption, and yet it's become legend, and it's another one of those legends that are not reality oriented. So it's like, I'll tell you one quick story is, I was, I had, I was working with Terry Kavanaugh a lot, and Bob and he were very close. So Bob would come in, and anytime Bob was in the room, I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to pay attention to myself. I just, Bob and Tom DeFalco, I'm like, I'm good. Not going to say anything. And I just sit there and work on the pages. And one day I had gotten approval to do this Beast story. And halfway through the Beast story, he lost, Bob came in and said to Terry, yeah, I don't want to do this story. So, you got to change the ending and da da da. And well, that's not fair. And so I happened to go to the bathroom. And as I did, Bob Harris was walking out and I was walking in. And it's the first time I'd ever spoken to him. I said, Bob, I don't think it's fair that you are just abridging the ending of this story after you've already approved it. That doesn't seem fair to me. He goes, well, life isn't fair. And he walked on. And, I guess we must have had another word or two, because I remember it as that did not go well at all. And as we got talking about to different people we knew, it'd be people why did you get mad at Bob Harris? That's crazy. He's the X-Men editor. I go, I don't give a flip if he's the X-Men editor. Why do I care? I'm never going to write the X-Men. What am I going to do? Yeah, kill off Chris Claremont? There's no world in which I would write the X-Men. So really, I could care less if I, made Bob Harris upset. And then a few months later, after Chris left and John was unable to meet the deadlines, Bob Harris hired me as an act of desperation, because he'd gone through his Rolodex, and anybody turned him down because they didn't want to be the guy that destroyed the X-Men. And it was my beloved Fabian who said, I walked by and he said, give it to Scott. Scott will tank it, and then everybody will be lining up to take over the X-Men. And Bob's like, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. But that was the extent of me knowing up until that day when Bob Harris said, can you do this issue? I'd only had, four sentences with him, and it was a disaster. But to this day, if you look up, why Scott Lobdell got work at Marvel, it's because he went to high school with Bob Harris and they were best friends. And Bob Harris said, I'm in charge of Marvel. I'm in charge of the X-Men. So you come over and write the book. I'm like, what are you talking? It's just this funny world. When I got DC at the start of 2000, I'm going to start New 52. I met Jeff Johns in his office. And, again, I didn't know Jeff. He didn't know me. But we were talking, and he goes, Scott, let me just give you a piece of advice. You've been away for a while. You're back now. Don't ever read the comments. And I said, oh, okay, And I went out and read the comments, and, I probably still have scars. Somewhere. It's just it's like entering, I don't know, if there was a Twilight episode of Gladiator, that's what, the internet is. So, and that's certainly what comment sections are. So, in the old days when I was, the old days I would write a comic book and somebody would read it and they go, oh, I like this and I like this for this reason and for that reason. And I'm going to go get a piece of paper and I'm going to write down my thoughts. And then I'm going to get a stamp. Mom, do we have any stamps? I don't know. I'm going to go to the post office. They have stamps. You're going to get a stamp. And how much is this to send? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I'll come by now, put it in the mail. And, a week or two later, it shows up. And I would go through the mail pile and read it. And they were often very insightful, interesting, sometimes tear-jerking. Sometimes, well, that's not what I would have done. But, when I went to DC, there were just posts that say, Scott Lobdell's cancer. Scott
Oh,
Lobdell's writing
jeez.
causes cancer. It causes cancer. You people are sick. You know? Like, holy moly. And to this day, I mean, I'm sure people on message boards are going to be like, meh, 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 meh. I don't know that it's gotten that much better, So,
No, it's gotten
but
significantly
I miss
worse.
letters. I miss letters. I mean, like, hey, I loved Legion of Superheroes when I was a kid. And when John Byrne came over and took over Superman and made him so he was never Superboy, I didn't say, hey, John Byrne, is tuberculosis because he got rid of the Legion of Superheroes. I mean, the truth is, the Legion of Superheroes were there before him. They'll be there after him. They are there after him. But it's just so, I don't know, the internet, oof, so ugly. Oof. So, but.
I have a question about Joseph. How was Joseph created? Was he always supposed to be, because he's become a very contentious character over the decades, but was he always supposed to be Magneto, like a DH Magneto without any memories, or was it always a plan that was going to be revealed he was going to be a clone?
Oh, I don't think either of those are true. To me, he was always Proteus because the argument that I was making, the argument I was making was nature versus nurture. Like if Magneto forgot everything he knew and got a second chance at life, without all his backstory, could it be that he would grow, that he would manifest as a better person if his trauma was gone? And Proteus was another example of a character who, was pretty much screwed coming out of the womb. He was just, always a mess. He was dangerous and he was psychotic. And I thought, well, what if he's given that opportunity? And when he comes out of the woods, he comes out of the woods as, this character that they call Joseph. And he was going to, and that's where his story was going to go. And if you look at it, like, this is a perfect example. The scene where he kisses her on the head, and it's like, that's not something Magneto could do. He can't cancel out Rogue's powers. Hello,
Ah, how did I not
So,
know that? You probably have mentioned that to me over the years, but like it never stuck that that was sort of your intent with him, was that he would be Proteus.
yeah. And I thought, okay, that would be really interesting because, like, they're going through this idea of, can we accept Magneto? And then the idea is when the reveal was to come, it would be like, well, okay, we accepted him, but we didn't accept him as Magneto. We accepted, Proteus. And because I thought, I mean, geez, was Chris and John, that first Proteus saga, holy shit, was that dark. Oh my God, it was so dark. It was so, I remember reading it, getting chills, going, oh my God, who the heck is this character? And I was never able to use him, I don't think. No, actually, no, I did use him. You know where I used him?
Where?
Can you remember?
I'm trying to remember where you used Proteus. Hang on.
No looking.
I'm not looking. I'm looking to the side of my. I don't remember. I can't remember off the top of my head. Can you, Tim?
I'm pretty sure.
I remember there was an annual crossover, but that wasn't you, was it?
No, he was
yeah,
in a cross. He was in a crossover event that was Star Trek meets
Oh
X-Men.
God, yeah.
Oh,
That's right, the one shot.
No. And really, I mean, there's a character that, I think even I always thought he was on par with Dark Phoenix, but at least Dark Phoenix had an anchor, and that anchor was Jean. And, Proteus didn't have that. So the idea of having him come in and join the X-Men, I mean, I think I told you once, I really would love to have done an issue of Batman, I mean, a miniseries, where Batman gathers this new team of 5 superheroes, and he, did I tell you this?
no, I don't remember.
Okay, what I wanted to do is have him do these 5 superheroes from nowhere, gathers them together, and just trains them. And they are the best. They are the next generation of heroes. They are like, if they had to take on Justice League of America, I bet you they could pull it off. Like that's how good. I mean, they had Batman as a tutor. Like how awesome is that? And so one day they're all sitting around, and Batman drops down from the skylight and grabs their teacher, who's Batman, and starts beating the shit out of him. And the teacher just laughs and laughs, and his makeup fades off, and it's Joker. And he's like, "What did you do? You took these people, and you went." And he goes, "Yeah, guess what I did? I just made the best superhero team ever, and no one can stop them." And he's like, "Yeah, but you're a villain. It doesn't matter. I'm a villain. I did what you couldn't do. You're always you're all your Robins. You're running off here. They're running off there. But I did you one better. So live with that, you moron. You bat moron." Wouldn't it be kind of cool? I would love to see that. Would you? Wouldn't
I
that be
think you
awesome?
should do it, man. Do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not too late.
One of the things about this issue, Scott, are the homages to what was it? Is it X-Men 98?
98.
X-Men 90.
I think of it as the start of the Phoenix Saga, really.
Yeah. How
So,
did,
it's
how did
funny,
those
too.
homages come about? Like in those first issues, Scott, or the first pages?
Oh, it was. I mean, I think if you look, it's so very much like that issue of. I don't remember the original issue, but remember that original Christmas issue? It's like maybe 98, 97, 97, 98. And I also did it again. I did this was fun. I did a 8-page story for Marvel Comics Presents that started out with that scene and then went from there. But I got to do it with the aging Dave Cockrum. So that was really fun. So you can see this is sort of an homage to my homage to Chris and
I wondered if you would bring that up or if you remembered, because I feel like that would have been one of your first X-Men stories at the time. I think it was reprinted in one of the holiday specials from like 1991 or something, right? And it's the X-Men and the Brotherhood basically competing to find the world's most powerful mutant, which we won't spoil who that turns out to be, but it's a great story that people should definitely check out. Just between the margins of X-Men 98.
Yeah, and at the time, nobody was reading that book on, you know what, this Scott Lobdell guy should start writing the X-Men someday in the future. But it was fun to work with. Holy moly, was that fun working with Dave. Here's a little inside scoop. If you look at the picture where he enters FAO Schwartz, I used to have a giant, like 6-foot teddy bear that I named Jumbo, and he was in my loft when I lived in New York City. I lived in Tribeca, and so I put Jumbo in the issue, and they even shout Jumbo. So this issue is filled with little things that nobody else would ever even recognize because.
Well, the Jumbo, I mean, that's adorable. I always did wonder about it, but I always thought like FAO Schwartz, they had so many toys and so many crazy things there. But you know what else you have that's a homage here, though, or a call out? It's Bob. Bob is there in the Marvel office, and he's talking about you and Joe.
Yeah.
Was that
very overworked? He seems very overworked.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Kiss the boys goodnight for me. Oh, he had triplets at the time. Yeah, that was one of those things. Like let's see, Cole about Magic tickets.
I think Mets tickets.
I thought it was Magic. Magic? That like Magic? Like I don't know sports, right? There was a team called Magics, right?
I was just thinking
what's he saying? What's he saying in that first issue? Oh, it says call Horace. Who's Horace?
Oh, call about
Um,
magic tickets. Call about magic tickets. That's like
Yeah, but
it says that's it. Yeah.
in the very first panel on that page, he has a post-it that says call Horace. I don't know who it is.
Interesting. And
But I
number one
do
tab.
love the fact that, like, as they're fighting, Gladiator gives him a smirk, like, this is like, okay, I'm getting ready to end this, because you're a little Earth boy and you're going down. And then in that moment, because he says, always take the fight from Professor X, or the first lesson Professor X ever taught us, the very first day of school. And he goes, I don't believe this. It's actually like always have the upper hand. And all of a sudden he goes, do we just stop mid-blast? And he said, yes. But that ain't possible, because impossible is a matter of perspective. And all of a sudden he's like, well, what? You're right. It is. And here we go. And in that moment he realizes that, if he can change his perspective on the battle, and because it's been firmly established in the comic book world, is that Gladiator is always as strong as he has to be. Hulk would get stronger the more angrier he got. But the whole point of Gladiator was that his power is based on his confidence. So all Sam has to do, he's not going to beat him up. He's not going to use the blast. He's not going to do anything other than he's going to change how he deals with, and he's going to reach in and give Gladiator that one instant of doubt, and that would be enough for him to win. And and everybody who was like, oh, you're treating Sam like a baby, I'm like, well, Sam just kicked Gladiator's ass, to you.
Well, that to me is like absurd because first of all, like it kind of like what you said that like the X-Men were the big leagues, and like anyone who was on Generation X, X Factor, even X Force, striving to be a member of the X-Men, that's like the top you can go. And even he may have been the big fish in a small pond, but now he's a small fish in a big pond with the X-Men. And this issue like really proved and solidified why Sam belonged on the team. And again, it's a little bit more, and I was thinking about it, like I think it's just like an incredibly uplifting story, given everything that happened to them following Onslaught. I mean, Sam even says it, everything we've been through this year as mutants, and like now we have a chance to find a path forward. And when he's fighting Gladiator and he actually overcomes him, like it's fun and it's a good message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved it. It was a fun issue, and it was fun just to see, somebody unleashed. It's always like, oh, now Wolverine's really, really mad. Sabretooth is really, really mad. And it's like, well, what happens if Sam is like, you know what? I'm going to take everything I've learned all my years before the X-Men, as an X-Men, under Xavier, under Cable, and I'm going to kick this guy's ass.
And he's learning on the spot. He's learning on the spot how to do it. So it's great.
Mm-hmm. Applying everything he's ever known. Yeah.
Scott, this was a precursor though to like the much larger Shi'ar story where you intended to have Bishop, Beast, Rogue, Joseph / Proteus. You intended to have them off in space for a very long time. This wasn't as neatly. We got it very neatly resolved, but you had larger plans. Can you share what those larger plans were for the folks at home who probably don't know?
Well, there's always this kind of internal rule that the X-Men never lasted in space. They were never as interesting because you took away the live in a world that fears and hates them. So internally, the office was always like, oh, you can't have them in space. You can have them in space for an issue or two, but that's it. And I was like, no, I want to send them off to war. There's this movie called, what is it? Not the Days of Our Lives. best years of our life. I'll tell you what it was. It was about these characters who came back after World War II, and one was missing his hands, and the other was running for office. It was like how these people are all impacted by going off to war. And what I wanted to do was to let the X-Men go off and just, I don't want to say brutalize them, but I was really going to do something so that when they came back, the other X-Men were like, oh, great, you're back. Beast, you're back. Sam, you're back. Rogue, who's this guy you're with? You're back. And the idea was they were going to come back and they can't relate to him anymore. Like they've been to war. They went to war in the heart of the Shi'ar Empire, and they, probably had to kill Shi'ar guards, and they had to kill aliens, and they had to, maybe a planet or two got destroyed. Like it was hell. War is hell, and war changes people. And the idea of bringing back, like first we follow them, so we're going, holy shit, was that terrible? But then the idea that at the end of the day, they come back from the world, and whether you call it the blue team or the gold team or whatever, it's the idea is you would have these 6 X-Men who were very, very close and loving with the rest of the team, and then come back shell-shocked and changed, and and what does that mean? And I thought, oh, that'd be really fun, because one of the things, like Galactus is a perfect example. There's never going to be a good Galactus story. What do you say? There's never going to be a good Galactus story, because at the end of the day, Galactus wants one thing, and that's to eat the planet. And guess what? He's never going to eat the planet. So every story, Dr. Octopus, if he wanted to dig up Uncle Ben and, sell him to Craven as a necklace, yeah, he could do that. Like it's a little creepy, but he could do it. It's an idea. But at the end of the day, Galactus is never going to eat Earth. Similarly, at DC, Trigon only wants to take over, like raise hell up from hell and take over Earth, and essentially reduce Earth to a cinder, and in its place there is Trigon's hell. And guess what? That's never going to happen. So to me, sometimes you get these villains and it's like, it's not going to happen. So why am I don't find it entertaining seeing Galactus being thwarted again, because I know as soon as he shows up, he's gonna not win. So it's just a matter of, okay, well, how do they beat him this time? What's Reed gonna pull out of his butt this time to stop him? And similarly, there are things you can't do with the X-Men per se. You can't kill half the team, at least not, maybe you could now because no one cares, but back then, when people used to care about them, you wouldn't be able to do something like that. But you could send them off to war, and you could test all their, ideas, all their lofty ideas about defending a world that fears and hates them. And it's like, okay, what if you're not defending the world? What if you're like on the offensive instead of the defensive, And so that's what I was looking forward to, is to try to really put everybody through their paces. And you saw it again you saw it a little before with Operation Zero Tolerance, where I was tired of seeing, when I was a kid, the X-Men, I remember a time when they showed up in a station wagon, and they're like, we're here. And people were like, is that a station? Like, did you just pull up in a station wagon? And back then it was like the X-Men had nothing. They had the school, but the school wasn't really a mansion. It was like, a few rooms in a house. They didn't have the Blackbird. They didn't have the healer who, you lop off a character's head and they're like, well, we'll bring the body and the head down to the Morlocks. And I'm sure the very gracious Morlocks will stitch their head back on. You didn't have Forge who would be like, "Oh, you need a TARDIS? Hold on a second. I'm almost done with this TARDIS that I've been working on. Give me a few minutes." And that was the whole idea of taking the X-Men and having Bastion take everything away from them and put them on the run. And so I like those stories where you go, okay, what can I do that comes as close as you can to stripping them back to who they were. And that was the whole point of this epic story. I was going to continue the X-Men with the adventures that we mostly know of, and all, every once in a while I'll be thinking, geez, I hope, I wonder where they went. They just disappeared on Christmas Eve. And but what happened was they were haranguing me so much because, they just editorial kept saying, you gotta get them back, why are they in space? They shouldn't be in space, you gotta get them back, you're getting them back. So I forget what issue it is, but you can look it up. And there's, I called it Joe, it's the Marrow issue, where what happened was Joe said he really wanted to draw Spider-Man. And I was like, what? We've had so many good artists over the years. Joe's the best artist around. If he wants to draw Spider-Man, let him draw Spider-Man, and there's always another really good artist, whether he's like ready, like a Brandon Peterson, or is about to be ready, and you can watch them grow into the role. And they said, no, he has to stay on the X-Men. So I said, So I wrote an issue where there are no X-Men in the issue. It's just Spider-Man and Marrow. And a huge portion of the issue was J. Jonah Jameson, where Bastion comes and says, listen, I need you to smear the X-Men like you do with Spider-Man. He's like, I don't even smear Spider-Man. I don't smear Spider-Man. I mean, Spider-Man's a menace. It's my job to, protect the city and put the spotlight on him. Because what do you think? You think I'm a puppet? You think that Daily Bugle is a joke? Hit the road. And, and it was like, it was so much fun to write that issue. And if people haven't seen it, they should, because it's like an awesome issue. And if I do say so myself. So
no, it is one of your best issues. Agreed.
Thanks.
And it's a great take on Jonah too. You had set it up, and I think some earlier issues where Jonah was being pressured, to, like you said, smear the X-Men, smear the mutants, as Operation Zero Tolerance was gearing up. So, it definitely was something that, even if it was kind of a backdoor issue of Spider-Man, it had some DNA from earlier subplots.
Well, that was the perfect thing about it too, because I was curious as a writer and as a fan, what does the rest of the Marvel Universe actually like? We always hear they're sworn to protect a world that fears and hates them, but the idea is that what does the average person think of mutants? And I thought, well, J. Jonah Jameson is average. Peter Parker, aside from being Spider-Man, it's like, he certainly has had shit hurled at him over the years. So when he sees things in the papers about how badly the X-Men and mutants suck, his inclination is not going to be, oh yeah, they probably do suck. I shouldn't be seen with them, and so that's what I wanted to do. I really wanted to examine. So you say it was sort of like a Spider-Man version, a backdoor Spider-Man story. And it was, but more importantly, it was, what does the average person think of Spider-Man? And J. Jonah Jameson is probably the most average guys in the world, aside from the fact his son was a werewolf, and that doesn't happen very often, as much as you think.
It's a Marvel universe, what are you gonna do?
But yeah, so that was really fun. But okay, back to the story though. So they kept saying, oh, get him out of space, get him out of space, So I was working on that issue, and I called Joe up. I said, Joe, what are you drawing right now? And he goes, "Oh, I'm drawing Gambit on a planet," and he looks down and he sees, these two people behind him, Spat and Grovel. Spat and Grovel are behind them, and he's surprised. I go, okay, well, when he's splashing his water on his face, let the water pour off, and we find out that they never went to space. They're in the danger room, and that was the end of the story. And he goes, okay. No one ever wrote. No one ever talked. No one ever asked me about it. No one ever asked editorial. They never sent any letters. They're just like, oh, huh. I guess that's weird. And that was it. So
I do remember that scene. Just in my head, I'm picturing Gambit, splashing the water on his face, and it was one of those, like, it seemed like maybe they weren't back from space yet, or you weren't really sure where they ended up, and I always kind of wondered what the story was with that. So that makes a lot more sense. Hearing
now, 30 years
maybe
later,
they were never in space. It was just
I
a
knew it.
simulation. That makes so much more sense.
So many people are going to be watching this, and half the audience think, "Oh, that was obvious."
It was.
My Reddit thread that started 10 years before Reddit, I called it.
Very good.
But I will tell you, I'm just teasing you, Tim. Spat and Grovel. Do you remember what Spat and Grovel looked like?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
really
let's
short,
put it,
blonde. Yeah.
Yeah, let's put it on the screen. Oh, look at that, Spat and Grovel. There they are. I love them because they were former bounty hunters, and she was his lover at one point, but he did something that made her start to grow backwards. So even though she's getting younger and younger and younger, she's still herself. So she's just trapped in this absurd body, and she still dresses like she dresses when she was a bounty hunter. And Grovel was also part of the group. And really, at the end of the day, he is a kind of an iguana, I guess, a big iguana.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why you need an iguana to break into, like, to be a Thieves Guild member, but he was. And everything that Joe and I were doing were turning into toys. Like, every single character we created was being turned into toy. And we were on the phone. I go, let's do something. Let's create the most absurd character that they would never, ever make into a toy, just to see if we can do it. And so we created Spat and Grovel. And I don't know, maybe a year later, you can look it up. You can buy Spat and Grovel.
Yeah, Marvel's Most Wanted figures. I was with Nate and Blink.
Yeah. And so it's like, so it was fun. So I guess we lost that bet with ourselves, but I love the character. So
I'm just gonna. I shit you not. I remember buying that 2-pack at KB Toys. I was with my dad. That was the only time my dad ever commented on any kind of X-Men action figures, anything that I was interested in. And he just looked at me and said, "What is that?" And I said, "Oh, it's X-Men." He goes, "It is?" And I said, "Yeah, it's newer, but it's X-Men." He goes, "Okay." Like, that was the one that completely threw him, where it was just like he seemed like he was used to some of the other, figures I was into. The characters he knew to a certain extent, but that was like, what is this?
Now, what would make this a perfect story is if you said that it was Stan Lee, and he knew that someday there would be something called podcasts.
Sadly,
don't
it was
forget
not
this.
Stan Lee.
Don't forget this story, Tim.
Right.
Don't forget this story. It's a great story about the origin of Spat and Grovel. So,
Love it.
Yeah, no, it was I feel so bad we wandered so far off course, but when don't we?
I wanted to bug Scott a little bit about how, he's writing both main books at this time. And I feel like that had been the case for a few issues now. And just what that's like pressure wise. Is it, obviously it's more work, and it's not, those aren't the only books you're writing for Marvel. So,
You mean
is
at the
it
time?
at the time? Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I was writing Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I was writing another book. And Bob, and again, we didn't know each other very well, but I think I've told this story before, and maybe I've told you guys, but it was, I never got, I was never given the X-Men.
Mhm.
I was doing one issue of Uncanny and one issue of X-Men overnight for 6 months. And I thought at the time, you know what? If I never write another comic book, I got to write 6 issues of the X-Men. Is that like the coolest? I mean, who would ever, I never thought that. I never even, never in my wildest dream. When I took over Alpha Flight, I thought, you know what? I'm going to kick X-Men's butt. I'm going to bring this Alpha Flight team and I'm going to make it the #1 comic book in America. But then I got fired while I was doing my first 2 issues of X-Men. So I, like I say, it was never given to me. It was like those 6 issues were over, and Fabian was supposed to take over the 2 X-Men books. And Bob was like, well, if you were going to do the next issue, what would you do next issue or 2? I said, well, all we hear about is how Storm and Forge are each other's chosen love from, the dawn of time or something. But we never see them together. Like they're never on page together. They don't talk. You don't even get Storm going, okay, thanks, Forge. Yeah, bring home some milk. You got nothing. And so I said, I want to wrap it up. I want to, to have her firmly committed to not leaving with him, because he says, listen, we're going to, this is life in the X-Men. It's always going to be this way unless we make a life for ourselves. And she thinks about it, and just as she's about to say, okay, he comes back and goes, you know what, I told you were never going to be able to make that decision. So I'm leaving. And she breaks down. And I would get letters and people would say I can't believe you made Storm cry. Storm never cries. Storm would never cry. Storm would never cry. I'm like, geez, Storm would never cry? Holy moly. This, I don't know anybody that doesn't cry. I cry at a good AT&T commercial. I'm sobbing, if a good one comes on. But the idea was that I didn't have any time to process what I was doing when I was writing 2 X-Men books a month for 6 months. All I had to do is get this issue out and the next issue out and the next issue out and the next issue out. And then when I started writing the X-Men, it was late because, the guys deliberately brought us to the point before they left for Image that all the books would be behind, and they're like, and I was like, back at you. And so that was, the experience, kind of it wasn't a game, but, it was a game. You would see the comic books top 10, and it was all the Image books, and Image 1, 2, and 3, and, X-Men was 10, 11. And I'm like, let's see what we can do about this, And then eventually when we finally did Age of Apocalypse, it was Image what? Are they still publishing? It was they were just nowhere in the top 20, I don't think. So, yeah, no, I wasn't, something similar happened to me. I was doing stand-up comedy, and I was going to all these different clubs. And the one club that I started at was called Bananas Comedy Club in upstate New York, in Poughkeepsie, where I was from. And I wanted experience. I'm like, oh, I'll, get a job as the, first I started out as the banana out front waving to people in a big banana costume. And then I eventually went to seating people at the club. And then I was waiting tables, and I was maybe the world's worst waiter ever. But I was getting ready, and then I knew that I was ready, and I said to them, I love them dearly, Harlan and Arlene, they were the club owners, and I said, I really want to get on stage. And they're like, Scott, that's never going to happen. I said, well, then I'm going to move on. And it was very sad because I love them, they love me. And one night it was, the show started at 8, and at 5 minutes to 8, I got a phone call, and he goes, how quickly can you get here? And I said 7 minutes, because it was like 6 miles away. So I ran, and I took my jacket, and I threw my lucky jacket, and I threw it in the car, and I drove there, and I walk in, and as I'm walking in, he stops me, he puts his hands on my shoulders, and he goes, can you do this? I said, absolutely. And he goes, okay. And they used to have the MC's voice recorded earlier in the day, but instead they start the theme song, and it's like, and please welcome from clubs and colleges all over the country, your host for this evening. And all of a sudden it stops and you hear, Scott Lobdell. And I walk out and I killed them so hard. And they were like, after I came out, it was like being in the Super Bowl, like all the people that worked there were like, you did it. And that's kind of like, I didn't have any time to think about it. I just had to do it. Same thing like with, Sam, he just had to do it. And that's how I feel. So no, I really didn't feel any pressure. And, because I wasn't plotting a 8-year legacy, 7-year legacy. I was just, what are you doing this weekend? What are you doing tonight? I'm writing. Yes, yeah. I gotta finish this issue. But I remember I was writing Shield and something else, and Bob said to me, I don't want you to not make money and I can't tell you not to work on other books, but I would rather you not work on anything other than whatever X books you need to do. And I was like, okay. And then, for the longest time at Marvel, I didn't write anything until I think it was Heroes Reborn. So
yeah, the Heroes Reborn Iron Man, right?
Yeah. And when it started, everybody's like, oh, great, he's going to make Iron Man just like X-Men. I'm like, why would I do that? He's nothing like X-Men. And then when we came back, they said, will you do Fantastic Four, Heroes Return? I said, sure. And then everybody's like, oh, great. He's going to write Fantastic Four like the X-Men. I'm like, why would I do that? It's nothing like the X-Men. So I've had a lot of fun over the years, like looking at a book and going, what is this book's voice? Not just the words that are coming out of the characters' mouths, but, the captions, the type of stories you're telling, is it a first person present narration? Is it, and so that was really, so to answer your question, no, I didn't, I don't think for a minute did I feel, because even that very first night when everybody at Marvel was at the Marvel Christmas party and Bob walked into Terry's office and I was there and he said, walk with me. I'm like, okay. I'd seen him do it with many other people before. And he walks me to his office and he says, he has these thermo faxes and he puts them on the table and he goes, 22 pages in 24 hours. Can you do it? I said, yes. And in my head, I said, yes, without a moment's hesitation. I said, yes, because in my head, I instantly weighed the idea that either I was going to do it, it was going to come out like crap, and people would go, man, he had 22 hours, he got the book out the door. What can you do? Or it was going to be the most amazing thing I'd ever written in my whole life. And it was a win-win. It wasn't like a win-lose, it was a win-win, because either I was going to pull it off and I would be, it's like Charlie Brown, like with the goat. I'm either the hero or the goat. I was going to be, one or the other. So I didn't really have anything to lose. So, but why were you nervous for me?
No, I just
You're like,
wondered
who
what it
the
was
heck
like.
is this guy?
No, I mean, it made all the sense in the world. It was just you wonder, flying solo. There's the two main X-Men titles at the time, and typically, you had two writers, and when you're down to just, the one guy, it's like, do you prefer having, kind of a not so much a co-writer, but a collaborator, or is it even easier from the standpoint of, well, I don't have to coordinate plots, we don't have to share characters, we don't have to,
Well, I could,
you know.
I think I'm a excellent collaborator because I
Mhm.
like, and you have to be, you're working with artists, you don't know what they're going to draw. You don't know what they're
Yeah.
doing. And in the old days, you'd have 6 months to fix it. And nowadays you have, the book is at the printer. We're going to tell them to hold up. Can you give us 2 more pages? And you're like, but back then you had to, collaborate more. And so I love collaboration. I've written movies with Fabian and I have written movies together years later. But we should have him on someday. We should talk because we do love each other. So, but in a way, there was an easiness to me doing Uncanny and Fabian doing X-Men
Mm-hmm.
because he loved Mr. Sinister. And he would fill out Mr. Sinister. And I would always be like, what has Mr. Sinister ever done except go like this at the end of an issue? There's always a splash page of him going like this. And I said, I think that's where he gets the goatee from. I think he just, but Fabian loved him. So it's like, you know what? Do Revenge, do Sabretooth, do Arcade, do, all those things. And that'll leave me, to do the things that I wanted to concentrate on. So if I had a cover with, two people the Storm covers are a perfect example. My 2 issues after X-Men after the initial run had those 2 amazing covers. The one where she's crying in the rain, and then the other one where her and Forge are about to break up. Great.
I was going to say yes.
Oh my God, such amazing cover. But if you look what he did, he introduced a character named Hazard, who I don't really know. I still don't know who he is or what he did. And no offense, Fabian, I'm just saying I don't know. But let him go do that, and I'll go do this. And, there's a symmetry. But there's also something really fun to be like, have an issue of Uncanny and, somebody sneezes in Uncanny and someone says, God bless you over an X-Men, it's like, that was really fun. But even so, like, I think we've all seen series where, I don't know, like Superman, Death of Superman, that was a crossover, but it was very much like you had to read Action Superman, amazing, not amazing, whatever it was. It's like this thing. Whereas I tried to, even when I was writing both books, like when I was writing Operation Zero Tolerance, but also the From the Ashes, I think. No, what was it? What was the Genosha storyline? It wasn't From the Ashes.
It was Eve of Destruction.
Eve of Destruction, yeah, and the other one, Operation Zero Tolerance. And they existed in the same world, but they were their own book. And so that was always important to me. Like, there would be some tethering that went on, but you didn't have to, although I don't know why anyone would not, you didn't have to read Operation Zero Tolerance. Why would anyone not read? And you didn't have to read Eve of Destruction, but you could, and you felt like you were, getting the whole story. Because I know, as you know, that at one point comics became, not only did you not get a whole story, you don't even get a whole 4 stories or 5 stories or 6. Okay, now it's the 6th story. Okay, now I got a whole story. Thank you. That only cost me $20 when it used to cost me $3, but not even $3. What is this?
Yeah. That was
How
like
much
what,
was this?
$2.99?
Oh, it says $1.99,
One?
and it's a classic. And that was
Awesome.
fun too. I mean, I loved. I will tell you one last thing. People would always say, "Are you ever afraid you're going to run out of ideas when you sit down and you start writing? You're afraid you're going to run out of ideas?" I go, "Oh my God, no! I am afraid I'm not going to have enough space this issue for all the ideas." And if you look at my X-Men run, especially with Joe, but a lot of X-Men runs, it was like, it wasn't a book that you could read in 5 minutes. There was always, it was
Right.
almost like what became Seinfeld, where, at first Seinfeld was fun, but eventually you would watch Seinfeld and you realize that, like, or if you missed an episode, people go, "Oh, what was it about?" You go, "Oh, well, okay." So George, and like 10 minutes later, you go, "Oh," and so then Elaine, and I did it, and it like took as much time as it was to watch the episode, and you're still going, "Oh wait, oh," and then Kramer did and so I don't know how they crammed so much story into. If you really look at the later, some of the later episodes, holy moly! Like
Yeah.
they started out doing, "Where's our car? Where do we park the car?" That was the whole episode. They did an episode where they had to wait in line at a Chinese food restaurant, for the whole episode. I mean, oh, but then eventually it became, this opera every month, every week rather. And, I know shouldn't say this, but I think that when I was clicking my most, whether it was after a issue, like a execution song issue or something, or whether it was when I was just like, I'm going to focus on the characters. I don't care about most of the other details going on right now. Even one or the other, it always felt like you came away with a book and a story, and you got your $1.99 worth.